In the previous video, we focused on going online with our devices. And now that we know how to do that, we can get back their diagnostics information. So for example, if I go online with my PLC, you might remember from the previous video that I get these icons here on the right. So now let's get started by talking about what all those icons are and what the different icons mean. The first icon you'll see when you click Go Online with a device is the Establishing Connection icon. This means that it's trying to talk to the PLC. If the connection fails, then you'll see this icon representing that it cannot connect to that PLC. And notice the red X in the bottom left-hand corner. If the connection is successful, then you'll probably first see this question mark icon that indicates that it has connected and now it's waiting to pull back the diagnostics information. If everything is good, then you'll see this green check mark indicating that there are no faults and the PLC is happy. If there is some sort of fault, you'll see one of these three icons with the wrench on it, indicating a different level of maintenance required. These icons will go in order of severity, with the green icon meaning maintenance is required, the yellow icon meaning that maintenance is demanded, and the red icon meaning that there is an error somewhere in the system. Additional icons can be overlaid within these icons. For instance, a orange exclamation point means that there is a problem with the software, generally an inconsistency between your offline project and the code that's actually running in the PLC. A red exclamation point will indicate that there's a hardware level problem. Typically this will mean that a hardware component has been removed or connection has been lost. This can also mean that there's an inconsistency in the hardware between the offline project and the online project. Along with the icons that can be found here on the right, I also have a little icon here on the left. You'll notice that I have a green square. That indicates that my PLC is in run mode. If I put my PLC into stop mode, what this will do is this will stop executing my user code. And the indication for that is this yellowish orange square, again indicating that it is in stop mode. You might also notice that I get some diagnostics information. Despite the PLC being in stop mode, it can still receive diagnostics and know if anything happens to it or to one of its slave devices. That's because these diagnostics are not brought back via the user code, they're brought back via the system. If I right-click on my PLC and then select Receive Alarms, I can go to the Diagnostics tab and then my alarm display, and I can see what my alarms are. The first one says that the CPU is not in run mode. It's currently in stop mode, which is good to know. And then the next one affects my drive, and it says that there's a connection error. That's because the communication with my drive is done within my user code. So if I put my PLC into stop mode and stop my user code, then that means I will no longer be talking to my drive, and therefore my drive reports back an error to my PLC, which gets reported here. If I drill down on my PLC and go to my distributed I/O and then my Profinet system, you can see that my drive has an error on it. So that's another way to see it. Also, I can double click on this wrench icon and that will take me to the online and diagnostics for my PLC. It's within here that I can get general information about my PLC, such as what firmware it's running, what part number it is, what type of PLC it is, the device name. Over here is the diagnostics buffer, and this is where you'll get all of the diagnostics information that was reported to that PLC. And here is the one for my drive. When I click on an error message, down here at the bottom I'll get a description saying that there's a connection error from my drive to my PLC. If I scroll down further, I can click on Help on Event, and let me bring down my resolution here. Here I'll get a description of what went wrong and then some solutions to fix the problem. Okay, so let's go ahead and put the PLC back into run mode. And once I do that, the icon changes to green and you'll see that my errors go away. In this example, I purposely created another kind of fault. So again, to see the diagnostics, you can right-click on the PLC and make sure Receive Alarms is selected. From there, with the PLC selected, click on your Diagnostics tab. Here under Device Information, you'll see that there is an error here in the PLC, which there is, and then here on my I/O device 1, there's also an error. And it says that the device itself is okay, but there's an error in the lower level component, meaning that the communication module on my I/O device is fine, but one of its submodules has an error. If you click on alarm display, you can see again that it says that there's a error. This time it tells you what it is. It says that a hardware component is removed or missing. It gives the name of the device, I/O device 1, and the name of the submodule, in this case my 4-channel analog input. If I drill down on my PLC, I'll see that I have 2 errors here, one error for my local modules and one for my distributed I/O. If ever there's a problem on your network with your distributed I/O, it will also show up here in your local modules to indicate that the PLC is also faulted because of that. So, if you see 2 of these arrows, always start with your distributed I/O and then go on your Profinet system. Now here I can see that my error is on my I/O device 1. Okay? So if I click on device configuration, I'll now get a view showing me that everything's okay except for that one analog input module. And if I hover over this icon here, it'll tell me that it's not reachable. Okay? If I look on the network view, you'll also see that all my devices are okay except for my PLC, which has this error because that component is removed, and then my I/O device also has an error because that's the device that was affected. So again, you double click in that and then you can see the exact slot where a hardware component was removed or missing. You can also find out additional diagnostics information about a given module just by right clicking on it and selecting Online and Diagnostics. Here, if we were actually talking to it, we'd be able to get back all sorts of information, like its part number or its firmware version. Here, we're just given with what we called it in our software. If I go down to diagnostic status, I'll see that I get this message saying that that device is not reachable, and that there's a difference between what's offline in my project and what's online. Offline, I actually configured this part number. Online, I don't have a clue what it is. If I scroll down to my standard diagnostics, again, I get reminded that this hardware component is removed or missing. And then when I click on that, down here at the bottom, I get a remedy to how to fix it. Basically, insert the module again. Okay, so now let's fix this problem. So if I don't know where I/O device 1 is, and remember, this name can be anything, so it'll hopefully be something helpful so you know the location of it. But if you don't, then simply find the remote I/O rack in your system with a red blinking error LED and simply go to the slot that has the problem on it and inspect it. So here I found the remote I/O module with the blinking error light, and notice all of my modules are green except for the one in slot 3. When I plug it in, I fix the problem and notice my error light goes away. Along with the hardware light clearing, you can also see that everything gets cleared in TIA Portal and I am error free again. In this next example, I created another kind of problem. Notice I got the orange exclamation point, meaning that this is a software problem. So to find out what that is, I can drill down on the PLC with the problem, and then you can see under my program blocks I have that symbol again. To find out what's going on, I can click on its drop down arrow. And then here I see all sorts of icons. The green icon indicates that everything is okay with that object, meaning what we have in the offline project perfectly matches what is running in the PLC. The icon with the blue half circle that is not filled in and the orange half circle that is filled in means that this object does not exist in our offline project, but it's somehow in the PLC. The icon with the blue full half circle and the hollow orange half circle indicates that this object only exists in our offline project but is not yet in the PLC. Finally, the icon with the full blue half circle and the full orange half circle indicates that this object exists both in the offline project and in the PLC, but there are some differences between the two. Now to find where those differences are, all I need to do is double click on my inconsistent block, maximize it, and then here at the top I'll click on Detail Comparison. I'll select Yes, and then I'll be presented with a side-by-side view of my offline code versus my online code. Down here at the bottom I'll have shortcuts to where all the differences are. If I want to find the next difference, all I need to do is click on this down arrow. And what Portal will do is it will actually scroll me down to where the differences are and highlight the exact difference between my offline project and what's actually running in my PLC. Here, it highlights that I used a normally open contact here, whereas what's actually running in my PLC is a normally closed contact. I can go down to the next difference, and here I can see that I called this one pot 1 top reel, but what is actually running in the PLC is pot 2 bottom reel. I can scroll down further and see that if a network exists online but not offline, it will tell me that no corresponding network has been found, and the same goes true for the reverse. Now, aside from just viewing the differences, I can actually make changes here and it will affect my offline code. So for instance, if I know that this one actually should be a normally closed contact, I can double click on it and change it. Likewise, if this tag should really be pot 2 instead of pot 1, I can just take it from my online and drag it to my offline. The idea is I want my offline project to be what the code actually should be. And then I can download it to my PLC, and that way they'll both become consistent. And now there's one last thing I would like to show you, and that is the PLC comparison. So for instance, we saw a detailed comparison on one function. You can actually right-click on the PLC, do compare, and then select offline online. And now I can have an overview of all the differences in my PLC in the offline project versus the online project. And then from there, I can right-click and launch my detailed comparison again. What I can also do is I can also pick from this list whether I'd want to upload from my PLC and put in my offline project, or download from my offline project and put it into my PLC. And I can do this function by function, object by object. And that's about all I wanted to cover in this first video on diagnostics. In the next video, we're going to continue this discussion by looking at the diagnostic tools built into Portal.